It's now time to create this Schoma view image for print. So this is how we left it the last time, where we carried out the final bits of adjustment in Photoshop, but now we need to do a bit more work to create a print. So I'm going to open that up. So this time I'm just going to double click the Photoshop file. Takes us into Photoshop and opens the image. We can see the sort of work that we did previously, so the different layers and things. Now I'm not going to touch any of these. I'm going to leave everything intact. I'm going to leave the color space setting to Pro Photo RGB and at 16 bits per channel. We don't need to change any of this if we're printing to our own printer. First of all, we need to crop the image to the shape that we intend to have the print. Now, most camera clubs have a print size or a mount size of 50 by 40 centimeters, and usually the print is mounted behind a card window mount. So the card will be 50 by 40 centimeters, and in this case the window mounts that I've got have got a hole in them 40 centimeters by 30 centimeters. Now, in order to make sure that I don't have to be too accurate with the size of the print, I'm going to make the print just a centimeter larger on both sides. So I'd like the print to a size of 41 by 31 centimeters, which should give me a little bit of wiggle room when I put the print behind the window mount. So first of all, let's go to the crop tool, and in the options here we can specify the size of the crop that we wish. So I'm going to put in there 41 space cm for centimeters, 31 space cm for centimeters, and in here would be the printer resolution, but I don't want to enter anything into here as it will cause the size to be interpolated. So I'm going to leave that blank. Now at the moment you can see that the height is 3375 pixels. Now the way I'm going to crop it, I go into here, dragging, and you can see the format, the shape is different because the print shape is different to that taken by the camera. I'll just move it to something like that. So I'm going to include the full height of the image. So when I go to crop, the height dimensions in pixels shouldn't change. So I'll do it to about there, and I'll take that. We can see that the height dimension has remained exactly the same. We're now getting a pixel count of 276 pixels. So that will be the printing resolution of this image, which is perfectly acceptable. You can go down to maybe 200 pixels per inch and you'll still get a nice quality print. We can confirm the size of the image if we go to image, image size, and there we have 41 by 31 pixels at a resolution of 276 pixels. You can change the dimensions here. If we go to pixels, you can change the physical size of the image. I'm going to cancel this because I don't want to resample or do anything to the image. I was just confirming things. Okay, so the next thing is to sharpen the image. Now we've got several layers here, and we've got clone layers, so we don't really want to just sharpen the background layer because that would mean that the clone layers don't get the same treatment. So I need to create a new layer on top of this. So select that, the top layer, create a new layer, and I'm going to press the Shift, Control and Alt key and the E key, Echo key. And that fills that entire layer, new layer, with everything underneath it. I'm now going to zoom in to about 100%, so that's Control Alt 0. Just move using the space bar, and we'll go and find a filter for sharpening. And there's only two you should really use, and that's the two at the bottom, Smart Sharpen or Unsharp Mask. In this case I'll just use Unsharp Mask, which is the traditional way. The Smart Sharpen is a slightly newer version, and that can be, well, that's effective as well, but I'd avoid using any of these because they are very basic in their mode of operation. So the unsharp mask has appeared there. Now this is final sharpening, and don't forget we're doing it for a print. So as well as making it look quite sharp on here, and there's lots of pixels, so that means that we need to increase the amount of sharpening over what we do for DPI, but we also need to compensate a little bit for the amount of smearing that the ink blobs will create soaking into the paper. So we'd need to do a little bit more than maybe is needed for a rendition on the screen here. So I'd normally put this up to a radius of about 1.2 or something like that. Go between about 1 and 2, something like that. Get the numbers right. And the amount depends on the type of image. Okay, so we've got the preview selected, and you can see what's happening in the background here. Now don't forget we had some pre-sharpening done in Camera Raw. So previously I'd probably go to about 150 or something like that, but because there's been some pre-sharpening already applied, I'm going to back that off to maybe about 120 or so, like that. Okay, so select OK. Control 0. So we've now applied some sharpening. So now we're ready to print the image. But first of all, I'm going to save this as an image for print. So it'll be File, Save As, because I don't want to overwrite the previous kind of master file. And I'll just add in here for print. Okay, so now we'll have 3 images, the raw file, the sort of master Photoshop file, and this one for print. Right, so whilst that's saving in the background, I'm now going to go to the File, Print menu. And here we are. Now this is probably how, in fact it's not because it's got Photoshop Manager's color, but that is probably how you would see the, if you haven't changed any of these settings, this is probably how you'd be presented. Printer manages colors. This is where the printer itself determines what needs to be done to the print. And if you use that setting, you're basically stopping that whole color management process that we've been rigorously complying with all the way through until now. So we need to change that to Photoshop manages colors. That way, because we've got 16 bits per channel, Pro Photo RGB and 16 bits per channel, Photoshop understands all these settings embedded within this image and will send the correct signals to the printer, but only if we have Photoshop manages colors. That activates the printer profile, and in here, when you install your printer, or if you download printer software from paper manufacturers, in this case this is from Permajet, I'll be using Permajet Oyster paper there. Okay, so these were downloaded from the Permajet website. I have a Epson printer, and these were all installed. These are profiles that were installed along with the printer driver. So if I'm using Epson paper and Epson ink, these are the printer profiles that I need to use for the different papers. Photographic paper, premium glossy photo paper. So that's what these kind of, you've got to try and interpret what they mean. But I'm using the Oyster paper from Permajet. Okay, so we've got that set up there. Normal printing, perceptual. Now we'll cover that in a minute. But down here we've got scaling. Now we've gone to great lengths to make sure that this image is 41 by 31 centimeters. So we don't want any scaling applied to it. We want it to print exactly at that size, and it's shown as near as damn it that size. Now at the moment, this setup still thinks that the printer is supposed to be managing the colors. as well as Photoshop. And if you don't do the next bit, then you'll get a horrible image. So we've got the printer selected. There's different printers there. So this is the printer I'll be using. I need to go to, you can select portrait or landscape. It's landscape at the moment. Print settings. And that brings up this little dialog here, and this will depend on the type of printer and that you've got, but most Epsons have a similar sort of layout to this. Now usually this will be set to automatic, and you'll probably have different media settings, and this is where the printer is thinking it should be doing the printing, okay, because it's on automatic and it's doing its own thing. So the thing to do is we need to go to custom and make sure it's got off no color adjustment. That disengages the printer's operating system, so that it's only Photoshop that now controls the printing process. If you look in this, I'll just move that to one side. If you look in the printer profile here, it's got an extension called PGPP. Now it's telling us that for the way they've created that profile, you need to have that setting PGPP set, which is Premium Glossy Photo Paper. So in here we need to set Photo Paper Premium Glossy Photo Paper. So that needs to be set there. Print quality, I'd normally have that set to maximum quality. Okay. Now most of these are kind of sticky settings, but we can save the settings later on. Now we need to tell it the paper size, because at the moment the image is bigger than the paper. Okay, so we need to set the paper, and I know that for this kind of size of image I need to go to the Super A3 size paper. You can always come back and change that if it still doesn't fit the paper. Okay, so we can now save this, give it a name. So I'll call this No Management. If you can spell it and not press the caps key. Save. Okay, No Management. So we can always go back and make sure that No Management is selected next time. So it automatically sets all those up for us. So we've done the important things. Off, no color management, maximum quality. We've set the paper or the media type. We've set the size. We can go to page layout and make sure that none of the sizing reduction enlargement is set. So we don't want any of that. Back to main. OK. Watch the image regenerate, hopefully, and there you can see we've got a white border around it, so we know that the image will fit within the paper that we've got. So at present we've got Photoshop manages color. We've disengaged the printer's engine, just set up a few things that we need for Photoshop to manage it properly. We've got normal printing, and we've got this rendering intent. Now we can change the rendering intent. Permajet originally says perceptual is the best way of doing it, and if you look down at the description, it tells you what it's doing to the different colors and tones within the image to achieve a from an image that's on the screen to something that can be compressed into a print. And there's a thing called saturation, and that gives you a different effect. I'd recommend you don't use that one. And relative colorimetric. So the choice really, and when you read the information, the choice really comes down to relative colorimetric or perceptual. So you really need to decide, well, do a print and see which one works best for that type of image. You might get to a stage where you think perceptual is always best for the way you're working. You need to select black point compensation, and again it tells you what all that is about down there. Now there is a thing called soft proofing where you can get a feel for what this is going to print out like by selecting match print colors. and then you can select gamut warning, and it will give you some visible warnings in here if some of the tones and colors cannot be correctly printed. And you can show paper white as well, but by doing this you can actually change the relative colorimetric, and you get a bit of an idea as to how it will print, because Photoshop is using that printer profile to try and emulate how this print will appear. Okay, so until recently I didn't bother with any of this, but it's something you can have a play around with. So that's all the settings that we really need to produce this print. And because we're using printer profiles now, these here, we've set up the printer correctly by disengaging the printer engine itself. We can now select print, and we should get a perfect print coming out of the printer, assuming that you've got the right paper, you've got the correct ink, the inkjets aren't blocked, and a few things like that. But this is the best way of ensuring that what you see on your screen is pretty close to what comes out of the printer. So you'd say print, I haven't got the printer connected up, so I'm gonna just say done, and we're back here again. So you may have to just follow one or two of the little menus to say yes, finally print, but that is how you would create a print. And then we can just finally save, which should save some of your printer settings. And that's the end of creating a print.